we're doing it live.
That is a really intimidating minute countdown entry. Oh my goodness! It's first thing in the morning over here, mate. That was too much.
That's my alarm clock every morning.
Goodness,
like, get ready, you got 60 seconds. Yeah. Oh man. So what time is it on your side of the world?
7:02 in the morning. It's not even that early, to be honest. But
yeah, it looks like it's like 3 in the morning.
Mate, honestly, it's because it just hasn't started getting light in the morning yet. So it's just that really offensive. It's far too dark. It feels far too early. But anyway, it's normally not that early for me. But I just went to bed a bit too late last night. But anyway.
We're live streaming on everywhere. I'm pretty sure this is on the national news. It's on every channel.
Fantastic, yeah. That's about right.
Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Clubhouse. We're even trying the Clubhouse thing. I don't even know.
We are on the Clubhouse thing.
We're on the Clubhouse thing. So
there's only us two. There's only two in the room right now. But
yeah, look at that. There you go. And I think people can hear us. I don't know. I'm not even sure if you're allowed to do this, where you do live stream on like video and Clubhouse.
I don't know what the etiquette is quite yet. I'm still working Clubhouse out.
Yeah. So, look, thank you everyone for joining. I think that we've got some people rolling in across different platforms. If you don't know, my name's Peter Birch. I'm the host of the Talking Health Tech podcast in Australia, and over there is James Somaroo. He's the host of the Health Tech podcast. Got such similar names in podcasts that I didn't want to make sure I said the wrong name. But,
well, I put a stake in the ground when I started my podcast of just claiming the entire space and just going, I'll call it the Health Tech podcast. There'll only ever be one. It's not really that important. Like, no one's really that interested in it. This won't be like a weird name. In fact, there's even a hyphen in between health and tech because it was sort of before health tech was one word.
Oh, you were on before it was a thing. Yeah, okay.
Kind of before it was a thing, although that makes you sound like you're trying to be cool. Like, oh, I was in it before it was a thing.
I'm pretty sure we just both referred to Clubhouse as the Clubhouse, which makes us sound old anyway. So
well, indeed.
Yeah. So I guess we've said to people that we're going to be talking about a number of different things. We'll talk about our predictions and what's happening in health tech in Australia and what's happening in health tech in the UK. Shoot the breeze. Look, we've got the ability to speak to anybody who writes a comment on one of the platforms that they're watching on live. And if we do work it out, we'll try and work out how to open it up to everybody on Clubhouse as well. But, let's not.
You need to unmute. You need to unmute on Clubhouse, mate. I think. Oh, there we go.
Oh, do I? Oh, I'm on muted.
You're good.
Okay,
you're good now.
I'm good now. Okay. Scott's on there. Oh, Jimmy Nichols, he's in. Excellent. And so as we roll in, we'll just talk about different things. And I guess if for those that are in Australia, well, I'm going to give my own shameless self-promotion for a sec, if that's okay, James. But we've got
go for it, mate.
Yeah. The Talking Health Tech quarterly summit. That's something that we're doing on the 23rd of March, and we're taking applications from people to speak at the summit. It's on the 23rd. The applications to speak at the event close tomorrow. So as well, the early bird tickets for that also finish tomorrow. So if you want to get across that, we haven't finalized who the speakers are yet. We haven't announced it, but there's a few that we know who will be speaking. We just haven't announced it yet. And so trust me, it's going to be good. So if that's enough for you to take an early bird ticket, then you can save a couple of bucks and get one there. So it's our first attempt at doing a live what do you call it? Summit thing. I'm so used to podcasting where you don't look at me while I'm talking, and then I realize that people are looking.
Do you have the video on when you podcast with people out of interest?
I do, but we didn't record until only recently as well. So, but then I've watched back my recordings, like of videos, and I'm like looking down.
Why'd you do that to yourself? Yeah, why'd you do that to yourself? Goodness.
Yeah, and I've got to realize I look this, not like here. So yeah, very novice in terms of video. But what about yourself? Like, what's been happening with the Health Tech podcast? I mean, that was the first like legit health tech podcast that I heard before I started my thing. So, you'd started a bit earlier than me, or quite earlier than me. Where are you at now with your podcast? How far are you in, and what's it look like now?
So we're about 100 and I've recorded, I think, about 180 episodes now. Started one day a week. The start of this year or last year, I don't know. Start of a year, probably last year, because we just started new year. We went to 2 episodes a week. So, just doubled up the amount of episodes we were pumping out. Obviously, just had a jump in listeners and downloads at that point. And I think, as you've done, starting to increase your listenership, it just starts to compound then. And I think more and more people find it, more and more people share it. And we're in a good spot, man. Like, it's nice, it's enjoyable. I think, as you know, when you go through it, you find your interview style, you find your preferred way of doing things, your preferred type of guest, the types of things that you talk about. So it's cool. Like, I've started really leaning into the entrepreneurship bit. It's sort of split. Each episode is kind of split into halves for me. So it's kind of, the first half is all about them, their background, and them as an entrepreneur, because I'm just super interested in things like, are people born entrepreneurs? Are people made entrepreneurs? How did you actually get the skills to build a business? Yes. How did you learn that? You don't learn that at school. Like, where did you get those skills? And so I tend to go really deep on like their background and just how they did stuff. And like, I really lean into that stuff for the first half, and then obviously talking about the company and what they're actually doing in health tech, which is quite exciting. Yeah.
And do you find as well, like, I think we spoke about this ages ago, that, when you first start out with a podcast, you think, I need to get the biggest name guest possible so that I can get a massive following. Then that big guest is going to share the episode to everybody, and it'll be, amazing. And I remember taking on a big guest pretty early, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. They're like, celebrity status, and they're, this is going to, I'm sitting there watching the stats as like it's gone live, and I'm like, they haven't shared it. But then the ones that really go off are just ones that are a good story, and it's an organization or a person that is probably really early on. So I don't know, do you find that as well?
All the time. I think if anybody listening is thinking about doing a podcast, don't feel like you need to get massive guests. It doesn't really move the needle. It can, but it can be transient. You can get a little spike that might maintain, but I totally agree, man. Like, what I say to people now, some of our Somex clients have got podcasts and stuff. I just say good speakers over good CVs any day of the week. Yes. It's just so much easier to get a good episode from it. It's far more listenable. It's far more enjoyable to do, and I think to listen to. I think that comes across. I think, you're absolutely right. People might come in for that one person and listen to them, but there's also nuance in that as well, that you got to wonder, why didn't they share it? Why didn't they listen? And often, looking back in hindsight, well, actually, maybe the quality of the episode wasn't that good. Maybe the interview wasn't actually that good for them, and that's why they didn't share it. And so you got to look at yourself when that kind of thing happens, I think, and figure it out. But I can remember I had a guest on called Mir Imran relatively early on, and I thought he was really going to move the needle because he'd done some really cool stuff.
The Rani Therapeutics?
Correct.
Rani Therapeutics.
Yeah, correct. Like 400 patents, and like goodness knows how many like incredible things he's invented and built, and companies and life science and biotech and health tech, and like super well-known guy. But it didn't hugely move the needle. But what did move the needle was just something like I did a couple of weeks later, like quite innocuous, and it really moved it.
I think I find as well that you get you get that credibility when you've had those guests on before. So it's more about having the big guests on, so that then you can then attract other guests who then
you can then leverage it.
So once you start getting in there, but it's not about that episode itself. I forget. I actually spoke to Mur as well. I forget what number it was, but it was. He's been on the Talking HealthTech podcast as well, so he's done the rounds.
This PR team are really on it, getting him on podcasts.
yeah, that's right. I've got my own advice for PR teams who contact me about being on podcasts. We could do a whole episode about that. But you know what? We should do a separate episode later on about just podcasting, because we could talk for a whole hour about that. But we dubbed this one about health tech trends and the what's coming up. And actually, James, I didn't even tell you this beforehand, but I did a what am I going to do? I'm going to try and show something on my screen, which I didn't prepare. Let's see if I can do this. I'm really testing the tech now just to see how. Yeah, here we go. Look, we did a poll on LinkedIn and we asked, so thank you everyone who's checking out this live recording on LinkedIn. The poll was, what will be the biggest theme in healthcare globally in 2021? And it was a split. It was 36% of people said telehealth. 36% of people said AI, and 29% said genomics. And so it wasn't like there was 3 people either. There was a few people who replied. But actually, since we've got a load more people who are checking out this episode on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn, then if you are on any of those platforms, then write in the comments which one you think will be the biggest theme or in healthcare globally in 2021. I'm going to get your input, James, and I can provide my 2 cents as well on what I think will happen. But it'd be great to know if anyone else has some thoughts out there. If you are listening on Clubhouse as well, because we're pushing all the mediums now. We're on Clubhouse, YouTube, Facebook, Writing in the Sky, whatever it is. So if you are on Clubhouse and you did want to provide your input, we'll even try and bring you on to the live stream, just because we're being, we're being
really ambitious,
so,
I think.
Yeah. Look, we've got Clubhouse happening over here. Hey to Jessica and Noor, who's on there. But we've got others that are dialing in now. Aiden just jumped in as well, I saw. So excellent. So yeah, that was the poll there. Do you have any thoughts on the big trends that are going to happen in 2021? AI, telehealth, robotics didn't even get a mark at all. Is that a bit unfair to robotics?
I don't know. I think, can you leave that up, mate, so I can be reminded which one's on there. Telehealth's an interesting one, isn't it? I think I saw a graph the other day that it spiked, but is actually on the way down. It depends how you define telehealth as well. Whether you call that phone calls, whether you call that video calls. It's an interesting one. I think it obviously saw a huge uptake, COVID-19 necessity, people absolutely using it. I don't know. I feel like telehealth should have been in a lot more places a lot quicker. I don't know. It's interesting. Loads of people are saying it clearly. And I think, for our generation, I think it is super convenient. It's solving a massive problem in COVID-19. I think it'll just be interesting what sticks. And I spoke to some behavioral scientists actually about this, and even they said, we don't know. We just don't know what will stick. It'll be just incredibly interesting what this COVID-19 world will do for the world afterwards. There'll be loads of things that do change. I don't know if telehealth is going to be one of them. I'm not sure, but I think, in terms of solving bigger problems, for me, the AI piece is bigger and better and has more potential. For me, from what I've seen from the companies that I've spoken to, it feels to me like there's a kind of almost the next generation of AI, particularly as it relates to remote monitoring and keeping people at home, keeping people well. I think that is going to do a big job as we move towards prevention and all those different things. So that for me is the one that I'm excited by. I see it actually solving problems on the ground floor at the moment. I see it actually being adopted and uptake and things like that. It depends on reimbursement and things that people are saying. But yes, I think if you look at what, in the UK, talking about UK and Oz, I think stuff that's happening that like NHSX are doing, for example, NHSX are really trying to help the adoption of AI. There's like a 10-point checklist for hospitals. Like, these are the 10 questions to ask. And here's the 10 questions below those 10 questions to ask of how you define a good AI provider, things like that. So even in secondary care, it's happening. And I've spoken to companies that are doing this and that are getting adoption and all these different things. And so I agree with you. Only hear about choice about telehealth, actually. And that I think one thing that, I don't know, it seems like a staple of like the world itself, right? As soon as we get new technology and new things and things like electric cars come in and people think, oh, we're all going to move to electric. Well, there's still going to be people that like traveling by horse. Like, we do still use horses. Like, there are still some people that use horses. We now just have more choice. Yes. And I think that is an important thing, is we get new technology, move to different things. It just increases everybody's choice. It allows us to be ourselves more. We lean into what we like, and I like that. So for me, I'm excited more about AI and the things it will do. I think the ability to remove the administrative burden from people, the ability to increase the quality of care, the quality of diagnosis, the quality of prevention, if you like. I've started to see the results of it in the people that I've spoken to, and that's why I really, really like it. Genomics, I'll be honest, I know less about. I know a company called Mendelian very well, who work in the rare disease space, and I know diagnosing rare diseases is something that they are doing with somewhat AI and and stuff. And that is super exciting. The fact that they can pick out people with rare diseases and do that in GP practices here in the UK, and super exciting. But that for me is the one. Don't know about you, man.
Yeah, amazing. Look, I mean, AI, I think that's AI and telehealth. Telehealth is the way that we deliver medicine in 2021 and beyond. And the artificial intelligence will just, anything that requires pattern recognition and routine, and the fact that we're still doing it in healthcare now, it's just a matter of time until those get cleared. I've always taken a pretty clear stance in terms of AI, that it's not about being the Terminator. It's about being Iron Man, the augmenting what is already done and helping humans be able to do a better job rather than completely annihilating them. So I don't think clinicians' roles are at risk. It's just changing what they do and handling the other stuff better. I saw someone on Clubhouse just mention that and they sent me a message, because you can't message on Clubhouse, but they mentioned that the audio is a bit dodgy on there. I think that's just because we're trying to do too many things at once. So apologies if it's, I think it's coming through okay. But anyway, you've always got other options. And the third last resort is, if you're not on Clubhouse, if you're on and you missed the recording of the video, you can check this out. I'm sure one of us will put it on our podcast. We both host a podcast. If you've not checked out James's podcast, it's the HealthTech podcast. He's in the UK. Mine's the Talking HealthTech podcast. And we're not related, although we talk about similar things. So thank you everyone that's putting comments in the chat, in whatever platform you're on, YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. So continue to put those comments in there. It's interesting in Australia this week, James. I'm not sure. I'm interested to hear what's happening with you. The big news within, or I guess the talk of the town for a lot of software vendors here in Australia at the moment, is the fact that everyone's scrambling all of a sudden to prepare for the national appointment booking for the COVID vaccine, because I think that there was a misunderstanding or poor communication or something that occurred, that I think vendors and the industry, in terms of software providers within healthcare, were of the understanding and had been advised that there'd be this national booking system that would then coordinate everything and that they would need to subscribe to and all of that. I think that it's only become apparent that in the last week or so, that it's up to the vendors to create these solutions, and that it's a scramble for all the individual providers who were advised otherwise. I saw someone just sent a note saying there was a bit of an echo in Clubhouse. They left and came back and it was okay. So thank you to whoever sent that message on whatever platform I just read it on.
So the audio is okay on Clubhouse at the moment.
I think okay. Who knows? Yeah. But if we try and bring someone on, it'll all break maybe. But anyway, you know what we should do? We will do separate Clubhouse, dedicated Clubhouse sessions. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing.
Yeah. So this was really just about getting excited and seeing how many platforms we can go on at once. And we'll do the video live stream thing is fun, but Clubhouse is a great platform, and we'll do something separately on that as well. So apologies if the experience isn't amazing on that one. But just back to that point. So there's a lot of scrambling at the moment. Is there how much visibility or insight, or is anything interesting that's happening in relation to preparing for the vaccine for the UK? Whereabouts are you guys at the moment?
Huge logistical challenge preparing for that vaccine. It was interesting just watching who was doing it, how they were doing it. A few startups were essentially building booking systems to help everybody get it booked. And that's kind of how it worked. The one I know very well is Doctor, who were helping, and they built as part of their telemedicine offering anyway. They kind of go into GP practices and they help them get telemedicine ready, essentially, so they can treat their patients with telemedicine, so continuity of care and all the rest of it. So not kind of an independent body that then treats telemedicine. It actually helps the GP practice itself. So, but as part of that, they obviously had a pretty well-formed, purpose-built booking system for those telemedicine patients that helped GP practices. And so it was therefore ergo, and I might be butchering this for them, but pretty simple to just then flick it on for COVID-19, change it and customize it and all the rest of it to make sure it's purpose-built in a way, or at least customized. But the point is they were able to just have this purpose-built thing. So that's kind of how it was working. And there's a couple of others that were doing similar stuff, but yeah, it was kind of left to to those guys. At least initially. I think there might be something more centrally now as well. But yeah, I suppose not my huge area of expertise, but I know that there was definitely a scramble for startups to claim that ground.
I just saw literally as I was joining this live stream to speak, because I'm a director of the Medical Software Industry Association here in Australia, and I would highly recommend to any software providers who are working with healthcare to join the MSIA as a volunteer role for myself, and that's it's ongoing. And there was literally a note about like updates from the Department of Health right now about what's happening. So I don't I'm not across the latest because it literally is happening as we talk. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of pans out. Another thing that's happening at the moment on our side is that, and I'm interested to see, to understand what it's like in the UK, prescribing in Australia. So as of the 1st of February, so it's live now, we've gone to active ingredient prescribing in Australia. So, you go to your GP, and rather than prescribing a brand name drug, it is now it's legislated that you can only prescribe the active ingredients. Now, there are a few caveats to it and a few exceptions and everything like that. But that's still being ironed out. So of course, then that impacts the software providers. And there's been a lot of work that the software vendors have been doing to prepare for that, mainly the practice management systems. But then it's funny, some of the exceptions include if it's a paper, like a handwritten script. So my theory is there will just be a bunch more handwritten scripts because Australia stubborn. But no, I'm joking.
You're testing if the clinicians know a lot of the active ingredients rather than just the brand name. Because I know when I was a doctor and stuff, there are some that are just so synonymous with the actual brand name rather than anything else. You hear it all the time, don't you? People call it Nurofen and instead of ibuprofen, stuff like that. It happens all the time. But I'm pretty sure there are some more exciting ones than that go by the brand name, if I can remember correctly. But anyway, I think it's an interesting one.
And I think there's going to be because there's actually an episode of the podcast on the Talking HealthTech podcast tomorrow where we speak to the members of Best Practice, who are a software practice management system that are in Australia. They're probably one of the largest ones. And they talk in detail in this episode that's released tomorrow about active ingredient prescribing and the impact of that. So definitely anyone should check that out. If they're keen, just go to talkinghealthtech.com and subscribe to the podcast. And that's that one. While you're there on your podcast player, make sure you subscribe to the HealthTech podcast, which is Dr. James Somaroo next to me here, and they're all good listening, and that'll cover you for the week, I guess, for all your health. But what else is happening on the UK side? Is there anything have you got some interesting episodes coming up, or particular themes that are front of mind for you?
It was interesting. We had one big tech company on, and now lots of other big tech companies want to come on. It seems that that can be something that definitely cascades. One episode that I did recently with Microsoft, basically, someone from Microsoft, a guy called Aditya, which was super cool. He's into Microsoft Research Cambridge and doing loads of things in AI and with eyes and ophthalmology, actually. So yeah, loads of cool stuff. But it was interesting that it's again one of those episodes that I didn't think was going to do any better than any other episode, but it's one of those that moved the needle. It seems that lots of people shared it. There was obviously something in it that I need to work out, what was it about that episode that everybody liked so much? Whether it was with Microsoft, and that's what made it cool, because it was kind of like a behind the scenes, behind the curtain. I tried to really get into what they actually do and stuff. So maybe it was that. Maybe it was giving a different view for a change of something that's not really that well known about Microsoft. Maybe that's what it was. But it was super interesting, and someone from IBM now is going to come on as well. So I'm going to find out what they're doing, and does Watson actually work, things like that. Asking all the big questions.
Yeah, you get to ask those questions. I haven't spoken to anyone from IBM yet. That's that'd be cool.
Yeah, and I don't know. You're right. I'm the same. I haven't really heard much about Watson for for a little while. Actually, it was all the rage, wasn't it, when AI was hitting the scene and kind of when everyone was talking about it taking radiologists' jobs, and IBM Watson was big. And I can remember all those pictures of like traffic and what it was noticing and all the rest of it. And it seems that it's probably been overtaken by just Elon Musk in 5 seconds of a neural net for Tesla, right?
I thought you were going to talk about buying Dogecoin or Dogecoin or Bitcoin, but let's not. We can have another separate conversation. I saw Robin, who's part of Talking HealthTech, about if the national platform was rolled out for the community, probably wouldn't want anyway. That's super important that it's a platform that's actually going to be used, because we've seen that happen here as well. A lot of national programs that just don't get used, and would needs the industry input. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless. Particularly whether it's the tech community or whether it's then the population, because people seem to forget those things. Rosie has mentioned, I'm curious just to active ingredient prescribing, the impact on consumers. Yeah, totally. That's a big issue. And something we talked about that in the episode tomorrow, actually. And something that, and that is definitely the case. And I think there are some medications that like the brands you specifically require, like me not being clinical, just absorbing the information over time. I will highly butcher this, but it's a requirement to be, to have that particular brand because of the way that it's put together and the compounds and everything like that. So having it then split out then creates other kind of complications. So then there'll be a lot of phone calls between, if the GP doesn't do it correctly or the system doesn't do it correctly for the GP, then the pharmacist will have to call the GP. And in the end, the patient gets
I remember when I was in GP, I know a case where someone was on for dermatology something, and the pharmacist in the GP just said that this particular way it was put together by this brand was too expensive, and therefore we needed to separate it out and give the active ingredient separately. And it was awful for the patient because it just didn't work. So it's a really good point that things might fall through the cracks, particularly as they say about people remembering what they're on and stuff like that. I think.
Scott Wilson said, I should read these before I put them up, but I can't read and talk at the same time, so we'll all read it together. The mechanics of machine learning, other work we done behind the curtain. Well, this concept of, black box AI in healthcare is really a threat where, you put inputs into a machine and then the machine tells you, you've got cancer or not, or like this person's okay or not, but it doesn't give you any context as to why that answer came back. Whereas, the open AI where you get to see the decision making is what's needed in health. And whenever we come across something in healthcare utilizing AI that is like black box in inverted commas, and the machine said it's that, so you just have to trust it, then that's bound for failure. So
I think Scott's point actually is that you just don't need to, like, it's about the results. And I think, when I talked about AI, like the bit that excites me about AI is not the mechanics. It's that it's actually solving problems in healthcare right now. That's the bit that excites me. It's starting to genuinely just come in and add value as a product. And I think that's the bit that matters when we start seeing the results, when we start seeing and start feeling that things are more efficient, better quality. It's just happening like that. That's the most important thing. But he's right. I don't care how it works. I just want it to work.
Oh, that's true. That's the other way. I looked at it.
I just want the time back.
I gotcha. Yeah. So there's both angles on that one. Actually, that's a good point. Someone mentioned from LinkedIn that incorporate telehealth into other use cases in healthcare that can benefit consumers where they don't need a physical exam. Look, I mean, I think that we've definitely proven that this year and beyond, that telehealth is just going to become part of how we do healthcare. I did a bonus episode of the Talking HealthTech podcast for our members recently, which is all around my predictions for 2021 and what's going to happen in Australian health tech. And one of those, like, number one was that telehealth just becomes how things are done, and that's what we do when it becomes part of it. But I still think the telephone will be the majority of how telehealth is performed. It's the lowest common denominator. Everyone's got a phone and everyone has got reception, but they may not have fantastic video quality and ability to do things that way. I think over time
it can just be that top of the funnel stuff, right? It can just if you've got a problem with your insurance, you don't go to the insurance building, you ring, and then if you need something further, you do. I think it's more that. I think as people have said, it increases choice, it increases the ability to get things done more conveniently, but as an option. And the common criticism is that you can't examine, it's not for everything. Fine, completely. But telephone consultations have been around for an extremely long time, and it is better than that. Clinicians, whether that's doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, are all trained in observation and being able to detect certain things based on what they see, based on the color of someone's, skin, whether they're red, whether they're pale, whether they're gray, whether they're gray. You can tell certain things on that. You can tell some people how they move a limb or whatever it is. There's so much that you can tell of somebody with that addition of video. And I take the point, it's not as good as being in person, but it is somewhere in between. And I think perhaps it'll be that I suppose the science and the art of telemedicine will get better, perhaps, or video in this context. I'm talking about it as video consultations, I suppose. But I think maybe that'll be it. Maybe it becomes teachable video consultations. Maybe it becomes a curriculum part of medical school. Communication skills, consultation skills. Perhaps video starts to be included in those things. Perhaps it already is. It's a long time since I've been to medical school, but I do wonder if you could perhaps teach observation. The clinicians that have been using telemedicine for a long time and video consultations for a long time, it might be that they know something that others don't. They are more experienced. They might have picked up things that others might not have. There might be certain extra things that you can do within a video consultation examination. It might be that you ask something different, and perhaps that's where it goes. Perhaps that's where it is going. I'd be interested if there are any clinicians that are listening that actually use video consultations and have noticed anything along those lines, because that would be interesting to me. I think.
So if you are a clinician and you're listening in and you're on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and you're listening in live, of course, then put it in the comments. It'll show up here. We can put it on screen and we can talk around it here. And while people are doing that, actually, I just saw somebody put a comment around AI. It's still emerging, but the associated risks are enormous, and that we're still learning about the damage that can be done, like racial bias. That's an interesting one. I think that, it's the usual kind of powerful tools, like with great power comes great responsibility, or whatever Uncle Ben said to Spider-Man. So that's, there's so much to be done with AI. And yes, there is, there could be a lot of bad done with it as well. Yes, there is the bias, and that is a big issue generally with AI. But I think that in the use of, say, diagnostics and other kind of things where it's kind of agnostic to those types of issues, then there's certainly a use case. But that's it's a progressive area. Scott mentioned something. Sorry, go on.
Just on that, I was going to say, that kind of racial bias in AI is something that I know that a lot of companies feel very strongly about. A lot of AI companies feel very strongly about. And when it comes to data sets and collecting that and teaching algorithms, I know that there is a real focus on that of a lot of these companies, because a lot of the startups that are doing that are in it for the right reasons, frankly, and they're doing their best. And it's one of those things that it has been an issue and continues to be an issue, but arguably at that data set level. And actually, that's that needs to be where the effort's put in to get the right data. I've seen and heard it in dermatology, particularly, picking up cancers and stuff. I'm sure, well, a lot about this, mate, probably more than me, but yeah, like. The dermatology area is obviously one that's obvious when it comes to that stuff, because melanomas are far more difficult to pick up on darker skin. They're far more rare, and it's far more important to pick those up, arguably, if whatever definition of that word you want. But it's the least likely to be picked up, and the most difficult to train the algorithm to find, and all the rest of it. So I completely agree that it should be a focus of an AI company, that they have to understand the biases. But I know enough of those founders to know that they are putting a disproportionate amount of effort. Perhaps it's just the ones I know, but
maybe.
I know
it's got people talking across. It's got people talking across a few platforms here on YouTube. Where we're talking about how, that's more around telehealth. So we can come back to that one. There was It's assuming that the current systems don't have bias. That's an interesting point. And then Rosie mentioned that, you know, the unintentional bias definitely comes from machine learning because humans are coding. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge to have, and the ethics around it will just continue to be an area of focus for a long time. James, I know James. How you doing, James? Thank you for joining in. And so as a clinician, works a lot in telehealth, follow up on patients that live rural. It's a big issue in Australia. Our country is very big, but we've got a lot less people than you, James. James Somaroo, not James Lawrence. And James Somaroo over there is in the UK for those that have just checked it out. So can you do and you can actually do a reasonable exam via video for quite a lot of musculoskeletal conditions. So that's good. Yeah. And it's funny, a couple of years ago, I remember laughing. I forget who it was. Like, it was a bit of a chortle that I gave on like episode 2 of the podcast, where like back in 2018, where someone mentioned something about teledentistry. And I'm like, oh, imagine, you know, putting the phone there. And it's dead set a thing. Like, we've had episodes, you know, on the podcast recently all around the effective use of teledentistry and all these things that you can, you know, again, it's like that initial screening component, the use of AI, taking images, and then the triaging of concerns. And
it's important, I think, particularly, perhaps not in fact, probably in dentistry. I know I don't want to talk about COVID-19 all the time, make everything about that, because everything is about that. But there is a huge backlog to clear right now. There, in October, when NHS England in the UK released their figures, it was 4.4 million people waiting for treatment in the UK. So a huge amount of people waiting for treatments. A lot of that is outpatients. A lot of that is surgery. There needs to be new models of care, new ways of the way that we do things, more efficient ways of getting through that number of patients to make sure that we're treating the right ones, that we're calling the right ones in first, that we're prioritizing most, that we're triaging best. So there has to be new models of care. In fact, one of the things that I think is going to be big is this notion. I put a LinkedIn post on it the other day, this thing called asynchronous communication. So in outpatients, for example, like you see people, and, you know, when I was at med school and as a junior doctor in clinic, you know, you'd see someone in clinic and then you'd be like, oh, come back in 6 months, come back in 12 months, come back in 3 months. You just sort of almost out of thin air, just, you know, pick a number, or indeed it's just the regular number that you choose. And that means that whether you're well, whether you're super unwell, in that time in between, nothing really happened. Like it doesn't matter. You just come in after 3 months or 6 months. And so some appointments just go rapid, like, yep, you're fine, see you later. Other ones, you don't have enough time because they're so unwell that you need to really fix what they're doing and change their medications and the rest of it. But that's synchronous communication. Asynchronous method would be allow those patients to report their symptoms at home, or stick remote monitoring on those patients, get that information back to the clinical team, and then they're only called in when they need to be.
Yes.
And so when you think about that at scale, so 4.4 million people, let's assume, you know, half of that is outpatients. I don't know, but let's assume it's 1 million people in outpatients. You know, you think of it at that scale. If you're keeping the well people at home, and then you're allowing only the unwell people to come in, you can give them more time, so you can do a better job. Therefore, they're likely to get better quicker, stay at home further, prevents that condition getting any worse. So anyway, I think when we talk about things that are going to be super important for the next stage, I think the adoption of technology that allows for asynchronous communication will be massive. Like, I really do. And I don't think it's going to make enormous headlines, because I think it's just going to be people doing their job very well that this leads to. And it's not going to be this thing saved my life. It's just going to be that you reported a couple of things that were a bit off, and you were called in immediately, and you got the problem solved before it got worse. And actually, that's going to clear the backlog quicker. It's a new way of doing things. And so there are quite innovative hospitals in the UK that are starting to do this. There's a company called Ampersand Health that are doing it in digital therapeutics. But it's all these different companies that can fit together to allow that as a method of clearing this backlog and making sure that the well people stay at home and they don't burden the system or themselves. It takes half a day. Like, you've got to take a day off work, you've got to travel in, pay for parking. Like, it's absolute nonsense for an appointment you don't need, and it seems crazy waste. So I think anything that's going to enable that asynchronous communication is going to be super important.
Similar but different. Like in Australia, we've got the RPA Virtual, which was the first virtual hospital in Australia, where there's the combination of remote monitoring from home and patients who are admitted but they're at home, and there's the monitoring that goes on. There's a combination again of telehealth, remote monitoring, the use of live but also asynchronous data to be able to manage patients who are anywhere in the country and I guess theoretically anywhere in the world. So that then opens up, and you're right, it's not super sexy stuff. It's not robots dancing to music that elsewhere, and it's not all these other things. It's just
Boston Scientific aren't getting into it anytime soon, but right. Plenty of innovative entrepreneurs and startups are certainly doing so.
Yeah, that's right. Leonie mentioned mapping research she worked on years ago, provided lots of teaching opportunities, how to engage patients. So video consults are definitely a subject for further learning. And you know what, as well, I totally agree. As well, I think that this is just the start, because what we're doing, we're adapting a physical consult into a tele kind of arrangement, and that's like stage one, where we're having what was a physical consult but in front of a computer, but by incorporating the like you said before, the asynchronous components, being able to communicate this data, and it doesn't have to be there like at the moment. That's like phase 2 of telehealth, where it's kind of like how we're working now as well at home. So not just in healthcare, just generally work. You see all these new software tools. Before, it's like Zoom has gone really well because Zoom or Teams or whatever you use, it's just because we're having a meeting, but we're having it on the computer. But then there are new platforms that are being built in a remote first world that are like with that in mind, rather than being backward retrofitted to this kind of environment. So that's going to be interesting to see how it goes over time. And then it needs the software vendors to be able to adapt and think of those things. But I think what's going to happen is there'll be the brand new ones that come out that will take the charge. And that's right. It works really well. And totally, James, totally. That's where it falls down, is the asynchronous side is not funded, and so you don't get to pay. You don't get.
Well, it's making sure the business model works, isn't it? It's figuring out, if you keep all those people at home, do people get paid? Does that work financially for people? Like if it's that old, if you keep people away from hospital and they don't walk through the doors, then perhaps the hospital doesn't get paid. And actually, so where's the incentive? And I think it is so often, you see this across healthcare, man. You must have heard this on all your a lot of your podcast guests, because it's something we talk about a lot. We lean into sort of the business side, and I think wherever if someone pays and someone else saves, they're not going to pay, even though it's better for the system overall. So then in the UK, you then get things like the devolved Manchester system, where like it's just one pot of money for it's all everybody's part of it. So if one person pays, another saves, it doesn't matter because everyone wins. Like, that's probably better. But I agree. Like, in order to make that work, it would need to work financially. It's all well and good me saying like, oh yeah, it's great to clear the backlog, but where's the incentive to clear the backlog? Who actually will make the money there, and that can be deployed in healthcare somewhere different? So it really does depend on the business model. I think this is the challenge for entrepreneurs in health tech, is figuring out the reimbursement models, and they change in regions and countries and everywhere. It can be incredibly difficult to find a business model, even though morally it tends to make sense. Tough one.
Hey, just shifting to a little bit to a topic that everyone finds interesting as well, and I guess because health tech is so hot right now, I guess the investment community. And James, your background was in a little bit around more like the incubator style stuff that you dabbled in for a little bit, and have quite a few. We both have conversations with the investor community around health tech and everything. We saw some, I guess, for Australia, record numbers in terms of investment in health tech, but I guess on the world scale, that doesn't really compare. Is there any insights or anything exciting that's in the works that you're aware of, or at least thoughts around investment in digital health that you can talk about?
I think people are just getting more open to it. When I say people, I think generalist investors, I think, are getting more educated on health tech now. I think you could have a conversation about investing in health tech with quite a lot of investors now, most investors. I think similarly, there are some health tech specific VCs that are popping up. I think, but as I say, I think the value at the kind of the lower end seed stage is that your average angel investor, especially at the moment, will have a view. I think that information about the healthcare system that was previously behind closed doors, I think a lot of it still is behind closed doors, and figuring out business models, as we talked about, all the rest of it is behind closed doors. But I think the average investor has got a view on health tech, particularly as it pertains like B2C type stuff that can help consumers, prevention, public health, like that. I think more people have got an idea and are open to a conversation on that. And I think, we've always had the benefit in healthcare and health tech of being the right thing to do. So when people do find themselves very well off financially, it tends to be somewhere that people want to add value, especially, if you've made your money in oil and gas, and you know, your kids might be turning around looking at you going like, okay, now what are you going to do? Yeah, exactly. And that is a real example, by the way, that I know. And that person is now very heavily invested in health tech. And yes, people with bagel companies that are now curing the diabetes that they caused, things like that. So, like, but it's real. It's real. It's true. It is the moral thing to do. And I think, I do think the average investor's got more of an idea on health tech now. And as I say, I think more money is flowing down. I think the ideas have to get a bit better now. I think there are lots of people with ideas. There are lots of people that want money for different things and to grow certain ideas and companies. But I think the space is maturing. Let's put it that way. When it comes to that side of things, I think the big investment groups and VCs are starting to have a healthcare, health tech function. I know Octopus Ventures just acquired, 10x, which was, Joe Stringer and Pooja, I think, were doing like a health tech VC, and they've moved into Octopus to do that now, which is part of a bigger group. They can make more impact. So it's things like that. Like, I think the space is maturing. It's becoming a bit more interesting. There's a bit more of a playbook when it comes to this now, rather than it just being like, it's health tech, but it's kind of a logistics company, so let's try and get investment from them and that type of thing. So I think as an investment world, it feels a bit stronger. It feels a bit more robust and kind of cool that we're on that we're involved in it.
It's interesting hearing VCs that a few years ago made conscious strategic decisions to not invest in healthcare, health tech, because risk, because time, and all those reasons that it might, from an altruistic point of view or from a whatever point of view, that it feels good. However, from a investment side, it wasn't really on their radar, and I think obviously that's seen a lot of those come back now to have a different story. So the
classic one there was we don't invest if you mention the NHS. That was the classic one here in the UK. I think that narrative is changing. I think there are still people that take that view, perhaps not as publicly, but I take the point that it is and has been unpredictable. It just seems that now policy can be boring, but it starts there actually. And that, if you set the conditions right and the incentives right, coming back to business model, if you set the conditions right, a policy that it means that like technologies can be adopted, it then kickstarts everything because the ground is fertile. Therefore, companies can be built, entrepreneurs can spot opportunity, companies can grow and get contracts, and therefore they become good investment propositions. And then the money starts to flow, and then people get hired, and then people get skilled up, and then there's an educational component that starts to grow. People get taught health, and so it starts with setting, for me, and that's what I learned actually when I spent time in policy, Health Education England and NHS England, and I suppose when I was there, it can feel a bit slow and all the rest of it, and it is, but you do also learn that a change in policy changes eventually what happens down the line. It does work. I can remember when they, for example, perfect example, they changed policy a couple of years ago to say that every GP practice had to deliver an out-of-hours service. Seems reasonable, but that was the door to a load of telemedicine. Because all of a sudden it was like, well, if we need to deliver an out-of-hours service, we could just do that from our own homes with our phones and laptops. So why don't we do telemedicine? So you can see how that kind of works, right? So there's people that rubbish policy is like, it's nothing to do with entrepreneurship. I like it. It's all connected.
It all comes together, yeah. Interesting. Hey, look, we're rounding out close to the end of our time, and just for those that are checking it out, there, for those who are asking, who are these people live speaking on whatever platform I'm on, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook? My name's Peter Birch. I'm the host of the Talking Health Tech podcast, and over there's Dr. James Somaroo from the Health Tech podcast in the UK. And we're really just talking around everything that is happening in health tech on both sides of the world and our perspective. This is our first kind of foray into this live setting. We thought rather than just choosing one platform, we chose every single freaking platform to talk on. So we're on Clubhouse, and I'm pretty sure if you pick up your home phone, you can probably hear this through your home phone as well. But kudos to those that are on Clubhouse. I've got a feeling that the audio quality might not be fantastic, and it is difficult to then engage there. But James, I reckon we're probably going to be spending a bit of time on Clubhouse from every now and then.
I think so, mate. I think so.
To do something dedicated there. So it's interesting. I've gone into a few rooms, and there's like, people are getting pretty serious about the etiquette. That's why I was getting scared that, like there'll be these
purists that don't like what we're doing. Well, we need to learn it, man. We need to learn the etiquette. Yeah,
getting amongst it for sure. Just to go back to Rosie, it's policy can be enabler or a barrier, and sometimes it is the barrier. It's it's the necessary evil. Unfortunately, when it goes well, it can help. So if you are on Clubhouse, then follow. Do you follow on Clubhouse? Is that what you do?
You do follow on Clubhouse.
Yeah, thank you.
You're sounding old here, Pete, honestly.
On the Clubhouse.
On the Clubhouse.
So yeah, follow James or myself. And if you do need an invite, I think we've got a couple left because it is invite only. It's a kind of cool platform. I don't know, have you come across any decent talks that have been on there recently, or are you still pretty early in the
Yeah, I'm pretty early onto it. I've been in a few rooms. There's a lot of health tech stuff. There's a couple of big med tech rooms and health tech rooms and digital health rooms, whatever you want to call it. There's a few on there, and yeah, there's lots of conversations going on, like investment in health tech and adoption, and there's loads of telehealth stuff. There's clearly people interested in telehealth. There's loads of stuff like that on Clubhouse. So I'm seeing bits like that crop up all the time, and I just jump in and listen in for a bit and stuff. But yeah, I'm learning the platform. It's cool.
There's always a new platform to learn, I think. But
exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if there's anyone that's got any other comments they want to raise or anything else they want to talk, then pop it in the chat. We can see those that come through on whatever platform you're on. That'd be great.
What podcasts have you got coming up, mate? Any good guests on the way?
Yeah,
you've got to say all of them now in case any of them are listening. Like, they're all great.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple that I'm quite excited about in particular. I just recorded one with Josh Case, he's got, if you check out joshcase.dev, Aussie, I think he's like just become a doctor, I think. Like, so he's not a medical student. He's been his resident, but he's gone down from being a full-time doctor to part-time to focus on solving problems within healthcare using technology. He's also a software developer. So this crowd of doctors who are software developers coming through the system, where I personally think that wave of clinicians coming through will be the ones that change healthcare dramatically.
Honestly, that for me is so exciting. Just imagine just having a software developer on a ward round. Oh my goodness, it would just be awesome.
Dead set. I'm going to butcher this story, and you'll probably have to check out the episode to hear it properly, because Josh tells a story, and he's written a blog article about it, actually. If you check out joshcase.dev, and good guy, he's written a blog article, but he explains the story on the podcast in a couple of weeks as well, where basically he needed to do some admin work on his rounds, given that he was, the first year doctor and all of that. He was lugged with all the admin work that needed to be done. And it was basically just copying and pasting stuff from one system to another, or moving one thing to another. And so I think in his lunch break, he wrote some code on like Notepad on his phone to then put over the top of, Chrome or whatever system he was using, like, so not hacking the system or anything, just running something that can be run through, the inspector view on Chrome, and was able to automate a process and saved what technically would have been like someone's salary. And that he did that in an afternoon in a hospital setting. And I think that made that concerned a few people within the hospital. But at the same time, I think it's awesome. I think that there's so much potential, and the way we think about these problems is just not from the ground, like up, and we need so much more thinking like that. So I think Josh's approach is he's looking at solving all these little problems that make a big difference that he can do using technology. He's definitely a guy to watch. And
man, if I could have done ward rounds with computer scientists, data scientists, oh my goodness, I would have loved it. Like the amount of stuff that I imagine that they would look at and be like, look how much data is flowing here. Look at the amount of stuff that we could do here. I think that I completely agree with you that there's going to be some pretty cool ideas that start flowing out.
Yeah, totally. No, well, look, James, thank you. And what about yourself? You got any other exciting podcasts coming up that people should check out?
Yes, I'm actually quite far ahead in all my recordings now, mate. You'll be very proud of me. I've got I think I've got like 12 in the bank or something.
Wow.
Possibly even more. Yeah.
You're done for the year.
Well, 2 episodes a week,
Okay, yeah. There's only a couple
I've just arranged one with a live core, which is the handheld ECG phone cover. Cool company, raised hundreds of millions, I think, or 50 odd recently. IBM are coming on. I've started having the odd chat with a guest or guests that I've had on like a couple of years ago, even. So doing sort of follow-ups and what's happened since. So I've got Sina Habibi from Cognitivity on for that. Medical Chain, which is some interesting stuff. It's like a telemedicine platform, but also utilizing the blockchain, which is interesting. They're doing really good stuff in the UK.
Blockchain definitely interests me. That's an area that I think like that technology
it is,
and how it's used in healthcare is going to be interesting.
Bit of VR stuff I've got coming on, and a health tech journalist I've got coming on as well, which is a super interesting conversation. Wow. Because I'm branching out. I'm going like, I've got entrepreneurs on every week for the past couple of years, but I'm starting to figure out, there's a bigger space now. As I said, it's maturing, right? As we're sort of wrapping up. There's lots of people that play in the health tech space. There's charities, there's like analysts, there's consultancy organizations, there's loads of different things that actually happen around the entrepreneurship side, like journalists and investors and all these different things. So I'm sort of leaning into that a bit and starting to find the other people that play in the health tech space to make it what it is. So that I'm really enjoying those conversations, because I think I'm learning now again of how those different bits play together, and it sort of helps me in all the bits that I do to know all that stuff. And it's all an ecosystem play, isn't it? So it's super interesting, man. And as I say, that just doing a podcast for the past couple of years, is the amount of conversations that I've had. Like I wouldn't have known half the amount about the health tech space without speaking to a couple of people a week.
Yeah, totally. It's something that if you want to get across a platform or an industry and you don't know anything about it, start a podcast about it, because you're going to pretty quick. So, mate, I don't know if it's your side or my side. It's probably mine. I think my laptop is absolutely sounds like it's about to take off, and everything's really laggy on my side. I think I'm pushed it to the limits with multiple platforms and everything, but we've got to the end of our conversation, so it's probably good timing. Look, we'll leave it there. For anyone that wants to check out your stuff, James, how do they check out the show for you?
So it's called the HealthTech Podcast. HealthTech is hyphenated. Terrible branding move back in the day, but it is. I might change that. Anyway, it's called the HealthTech Podcast. You can get it on every platform. And you can find all my stuff in the description of those episodes.
Get amongst it. Cool. And check out talkinghealthtech.com. I want to check out that side. We've got had the podcast. We've got the community as well that we've been building up, and there's a few other bits and pieces on the website that you should check out. We've actually had a few people from the UK, funnily enough. I don't know what it is, but a few doctors or medical students looking to come from the UK to Australia and wanting to learn more about the Australian health tech scene, and they're coming into the THT Plus community to do that. So it's a cool resource.
They're there for the weather and the beaches, mate.
Yeah. I thought it was for the THT Plus community.
They're not talking health tech, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they.
I'm joking,
of course. So you say. Yes. No, look, well, thank you, everybody, for joining. We're going to wrap it up here. You'll probably hear some of this conversation on one of our podcasts at some point, but we'll probably come on again and do something live stream or something in Clubhouse. So thank you, everybody. You have a good evening.
Cheers, dude.